otherwise.
When he tells Timothy to pass on all the things that you heard from me, there are multiple then injunctions to pass on the oral teachings.
Yes, and that is one of the key texts in regards to what Christian education is to be. Timothy is to pass on these things to men that he knows, that he's examined. This is within the local church. This is not an indication that what Timothy is going to be passing on to them is something other than what is found in Scripture. In other words, the assumption that is being made, when Catholics use this argument, that becomes the foundation of dogmas as wildly ahistorical as papal infallibility or the bodily assumption. With Eastern Orthodoxy, it's not so much the content as liturgy, prayers, forms of worship that become the mechanism that give rise to Eastern Orthodox worship, I guess. I mean, it's not that they don't have other doctrines that are unbiblical, but again, Orthodoxy doesn't have the dogmatic infrastructure that Roman Catholicism has because of the Eastern mindset versus the Western mindset and where truth is to be located, observed, and how it's communicated. Keep telling people that's why this is such a tough topic to address.
The apostles as well as the written texts. Some of those written texts we no longer have. They passed away into history. Letters that Paul wrote that we, again, don't have access to anymore.
Which means that in God's providence, they were not intended to be Scripture. I don't know how else you could come to any other conclusion other than the assumption that, well, as long as an apostle is writing it, that makes it automatically something that God has intended for the church to possess. So why bring this up? There were, in all probability, other letters that the apostle wrote, but that were not kept by the church and viewed by the church as Scripture. What does that have to do with sola scriptura? I don't know.
But again, if we think about the fact that for many, many, many centuries during the time of the patriarchs, right, Noah, all the way to Abraham up to Moses, we don't know what that textual history was, if it was even written down.
Okay, once again, sola scriptura is the assertion that the Scriptures are the sole infallible rule of faith for the church. Sola scriptura is not a principle that you attempt to cram into history during periods of revelation. We're answering a simple question. What does the church possess that is theopneustos? If it is theopneustos, by its very nature, it is of a superior authority to that which is not theopneustos. Since man's traditions are not theopneustos, then they have to be subject to that which is theopneustos. And this is what Jesus taught us in both Matthew and Mark when he taught us to examine the traditions that were delivered to us, even traditions, as we see in Matthew 15, even traditions that the Jews claimed to be divine in origin, have found their origin in God himself. We are to test those things by the written revelation in the graphe, in the Scriptures. And so what Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox will do is they will say, well, but that couldn't have worked before the New Testament was written. Well, we're not living before the New Testament was written. Well, what about that? Well, we're not living then. Sola scriptura is a claim that after the apostles die, what is the sole infallible rule of faith of the church? Not what was it when the apostles were alive, when prophets were alive, when Scripture is being written. Now, Scripture's not being written now. So now, today, and this is where the battle must be fought, because it's, especially in Rome, but in Orthodoxy as well, you have unbiblical offices of authority that are being pressed upon Christians. And so they can't allow those offices to be examined on a biblical basis because there's no biblical basis for them. And so what they do is they will transport you back into a period of time of revelation and say, oh, sola scriptura doesn't work here. We're not in a period of revelation. Revelation has finished. God has given us everything we need to know for life and godliness in what he has revealed in and through Jesus Christ. And so the question is, today in 2020, what do we have that is theopneustos? And the answer that we normally get from folks like this is, well, you can't know apart from us. That was not the answer that was given originally. But all of that, you keep your eye on the ball. When listening, especially to people who have left and gone away, keep your eye on the ball, because they have now accepted another source of authority, and they don't want to have to defend that source of authority. They will put you on your back foot and demand that you defend your source of authority, but not on the same foundation that they're going to assert their own. And so it's when you're talking about ultimate authorities, it's always a situation with these guys where they draw a line and then they just sort of wipe that out with their foot and draw a little bit farther back. You push them a little bit farther, and they can't answer the authority question for themselves in the way they're demanding that you do. Unfortunately, most Bible-believing Christians have not dealt with this issue and hence don't know how to recognize this and are subject to being caught up in this kind of thinking. So we'll just continue with this. I mean, it's the same stuff all the time. So we'll just continue responding to it as time allows as we